Hi, friends. I'm Andy Greene, and I've struggled with my eating habits for a long time, and I've had a lot of shame along the way. Today, I'm going to try something new. Today, I'm eating intuitively as I examine my habits around food to try and find a better way, because this is the Naked Man Podcast. This week's guest is Victoria Yates, a stellar name, I might add. Victoria is a health coach who specializes in intuitive eating, a non-diet approach to eating, an approach that reminds us how to listen to our body. Victoria is an RN BSN, a licensed nurse with a bachelor's degree in nursing who shares her wisdom and experiences with her clients on the Redefining Health podcast. Victoria came to my attention via my friend and decision coach, Kirsten Parker, who raved about Victoria's intuitive eating course while we were hiking. This information immediately lit up my brain. I had been noodling over my often troublesome, unhealthy dynamic around food and my ever vacillating weight while not changing much of anything about what I ate or how I exercised. So now here was a breadcrumb from the universe. My intuition led me to reach out to Victoria for help. What is intuitive eating? Can it help me? I've binged. I often eat mindlessly and multitask while doing it. They called me Andy Two Cakes at the dining hall in college. I have so many thorny relationships and stories around food that I've collected over the years, and it's time to talk about them. So thankfully, Victoria is here to help me do just that. Victoria Yates, welcome to the Naked Man Podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Andy. I'm pleasured to be here.
Thank you. You're welcome and thank you. And I'm excited and I'm nourished food wise, so that shouldn't be an issue. But how do we normally start a session? I wanna dive in.
Just tell me a little bit about your relationship with food and like history as far as that goes.
When I was in college or after, it was anxiety and depression, but I was up to like 70 or 80 pounds higher than I am now. I'd say 250. I'm actually 190 right now. And I know weight is probably a thorny thing to even discuss or think that matters, but I was an unhealthy person at that time. I had a physical where they basically said I had pre-diabetes or like was in danger of that diagnosis. And that thankfully sort of woke me up to like, oh, I need to exercise and eat a little bit better. At the time, definitely a lot more drinking in my life and a lot of meatloaf Mondays, which is not a joke. We would have meatloaf every Monday. And they were not healthy meatloafs. I'm saying not healthy meatloafs, but I was also having really a lot of fun on those Monday nights and enjoy meatloafs. And it was a cooking thing. We'd make weird, to make one every week, we would have fun with the recipes. So I recognize even when I'm saying that there's shame attached around me enjoying myself eating and doing these different things. But I know I was sort of eating to excess. And so I mentioned, mindlessly eating. And I feel like when I start something I think it's probably not out of the ordinary to just start a snack or start a dessert or whatever it is. I just plow through it. I definitely eat faster than the average person, I would say. I think I don't know who I was going to say I get that from my dad, but I think I just get that from the world. And so, yeah, I definitely, even as someone who, I'm a tourist, so I'm very into eating and food and good stuff. And I love food and love being a snob about it and being like, oh, I want the best food. But honestly, after the first couple of bites, I do sort of, I think, just go into, it almost feels like anxious eating, or I'm just eating until it's done, sort of a thing. I think, especially if I'm interacting with other people, like if I was eating while we were having this conversation, I would want to eat it as fast as I could so I could then focus on you or like not be chewing and eating at the same time. So I think that's definitely a thing. And there's something about me always wanting the best things or and sometimes that I think I weaponize that against myself. It's sort of like, well, I want everything on the menu because it's like, not how can I make a decision? It's kind of like, I may only be here once at this restaurant because that's kind of who I am. I want to go to all the places. And I feel like that then leads me to order maybe more things than I need to, or at least there's this guilt or pressure to like order the right thing, which is hilarious. But that's like probably that's a different thing, I think. So I mean, that's like a little bit. I do know. I've never, I've in terms of, I've never like purged. I've never starved I've never done any of those things, but I definitely have the like regret after eating or feeling like, that was, kind of coming out of it and being like, oh yeah, why did I eat the whole bag of gummy bears? Did not need to do that, but it was sort of this like, I start and then it just goes. And it does feel like this, like, it does feel like addiction in some way when it's in it. And I, I've struggled with a bunch of different sort of things with anxiety over the years. And it does feel like sometimes if I don't know what to do with my life like maybe in general, but in the day, in that moment, there's like angst or unrest about the day. I have in the past gone to like food in that way. Normally I've gotten to where I'm having like fruit. So it's like, okay, if I have an apple, like we'll be okay. Like I don't want to be, I'm not like eating cake or something, even if that's would be okay if that's what I wanted, but I don't think I was necessarily doing it from an intuitive eating place. But I'm also just sort of intuitively saying that, meaning I don't know your stuff. But so is that I feel like I gave you
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I hear is there's and this is true for most people. Like there's a lot of different components that, kind of happen. Like I heard, potentially some emotional eating kind of going on, or just like just like mindless eating, like distracted type eating. But I'm curious, I think what would be helpful is if you can think about the
yes.
time recently where you've had just a scenario where, like you were saying, that you kind of ended eating and you felt that guilt or that shame, or just something didn't feel great about how you were eating. Maybe you could describe a time recently where it felt like that for you.
I mean, I feel like the most recent it would be just sort of the classic. I mean, it was a dessert of some kind, I think. I mean, I mentioned the gummy bears, and I feel like that's kind of the thing. Candy, for whatever reason,
Mhm.
incites, and I don't. That's why I don't have it in the house often. But if it's there, and I know it's there, I want it in some way, and then I want to eat all of it. And I think sometimes, I mean, the most I know there are more, but I just know that this has happened during Christmas. We get from my mom. I mean, I love them, like a bag of like crazy assorted candies, like gummies, sours, whatever. And by we, I mean me, my sister, her husband, my partner. Um, and then, yeah, it almost feels like once that bag is opened, it's, choose it for a movie night. And then it's just like, almost in one sitting, I'm just going. And I do afterwards sort of like, I mean, I'm like enjoying it. I try to slow down, I put it away, and then I'm like, oh, but I want more. And then, come back to it. And then I just have that sort of that sugar. I mean, with that one, it's not necessarily like over full, but because it's like the sugar high or the like, okay, this is not, I just know that I don't feel good. I know that my body didn't actually want that. But I went all for it for whatever reason. And at the time I was just sitting watching a movie. Like I wasn't actively anxious about it. Like it wasn't like I wasn't nervous for this podcast or whatever, like maybe a thing that would make me want to do that. I think there's just sort of this, I don't know. It does almost feel like just there needs to be like added input almost, or like over stimulation kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yeah. When you have that first piece of candy or whatever it is,
Yeah.
like what are your thoughts about, number one, what are your thoughts about candy as a whole? Like, do you feel like eating candy is good, bad, or neutral? Like, what are your thoughts?
It's a good question. I think almost I would pretty much say I would lean. I mean, I think the answer is probably not bad because that's what I'm giving into it. But I think I'm so used to it being bad in terms of the amount that I will eat it. And that's sort of
Mm,
the thing. I think there's kind of, um, I don't think I would ever say that necessarily it's good other than I really like, I enjoy it. But like, there's so many different
Sure.
things in terms of like the processing of it, like what it's made out of, all the different things. Like, I know it's processed to make me eat like an animal, like, and I say an animal, like we're an animal, but you know what I mean? Like just going mindlessly and having too much, because it kind of has those, a lot of them aren't natural, can't like things.
Mhm. You
So
don't just
I
pick
think that
candy off of the tree.
yeah, exactly. It's not that. Oh
Right.
man, if, I wish. But yeah. So I think it's that there's like this knowledge that it's unhealthy for me at, well, maybe on a base level, but also just certainly at like, I know. I mean, very rarely in my life have I ever done the serving size of, you know, a candy.
Mhm.
And I mean, serving sizes, I'm sure, is something that you could do like a whole season of your show on, because I don't know. It always just feels like it serves to judge myself when I'm just like, wait, five?
Mhm.
I have five gummy bears? Like,
Right.
might as well, like, I
Yeah.
don't know. So I think my answer would be bad, even though I feel like I know it's a trick question, because I feel like it's like neutral. It's me that's bringing that, or society is
Yeah.
bringing that
Well, I
to
think
it.
that's really good awareness, and the goal is not to be like, "This is a trick question." It's rather to
I
just, like,
know.
get a better idea of, like, how are you thinking as you're sitting down or standing up and eating the candy, because that is going to play a huge role in how you are eating it. You know, like, your thoughts, and this is something that I see with a lot of my clients. I would even go I'll say all of my clients, is that's it's a lot of times the way that we show up with food is impacted by our thinking about it. And so something that you said a minute ago that kind of sparked my thoughts on what might be going on is, something I see a lot is this very like all or nothing thinking with
Mm,
foods, like with just food in general. So it's like, if I'm
mm,
gonna eat one gummy bear or one gummy worm or whatever it is, then I've like already kind of failed. I've already done something wrong. And then it's like just kind of throw all the regard out the window. And I almost see this like almost like I don't I for lack of a better way to say it, like almost like blacking out, like providing this distance between you and your body because you don't want to experience the shame or the judgment. So you almost like dissociate a little bit and go to, well, like I've already failed, so I'm just going to keep eating. And then you end up at the end eating more than you want and then feeling that guilt and shame because that kind of comes up after you stop eating. Does that sound like something that might be going on? Does that resonate?
that does resonate. And all or nothing thinking was definitely something that came up a lot in early therapy as just sort of how I would think
Mhm.
about life or myself. Or it's like, you know, I'm either, you know, very simplistic ways of thinking of just like black and white binary stuff of just like, oh, I'm good, I'm bad, you know, or whatever it is, rather than just like it's all in between. And that makes a lot of sense. I think all or nothing, especially with food. Yeah, I think that it does feel like sort of, I think it even goes into like, I mean, I don't like wasting things too. So like I use that as an excuse to like, well, I have to finish this thing, you know, like I ordered it, it's my responsibility. Or whatever it is. If, especially if it's something that isn't conducive to leftovers or whatever it is. Or maybe sometimes I don't even think that that's an option, right? Um,
Mhm.
because I'm not averse to leftovers. I actually love leftovers. So, but yeah, no, you're right. And there is that disassociation thing. There is kind of the like, oh yeah, like I wanted to, and you know, I enjoyed maybe the first few pieces of candy or French fries or whatever thing that tends to be like sort of a basket where I'm just like going. And then after that, it's like, yeah, I ate too much, but I also don't necessarily, yeah, remember or have the experience of eating it beyond that, like the opening salvo, basically.
Yeah.
Um, so shit. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that
Well,
all or nothing is like, well, yeah. And it kind of does feel like that. It's like if I order the cake, I'm not going to take a bite of it, you know, or like I'm not going to only have a bite of it. But then I also want to try the cake, you know, and I don't think, and I
mhm.
am to the point for the most part where I'm like, life is, you know, life is hard and painful. Like I want to try the cake. Like I don't think like I don't deserve or don't need any cake or that like I have to have no sugar at all. And I don't know, I think maybe always sort of known that diets, or at least I've never actually tried a diet full hand, which maybe is a different, most of your clients, I assume, are coming off of diets that just have never worked for them, or they're frustrated by diet culture. And I totally understand that without ever actually, I mean, I definitely know people that have done it, my parents, other people, but I don't think I've ever, aside from being like, oh, I think I'm going to focus on Mediterranean foods. That's about the
Mhm.
extent as I've done, other than just like eating healthy in a general sense and exercising more. That's just
Yeah.
sort of how I think about it.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, like when we think about that all or nothing thinking, it's really rooted in, it's just another like way that perfectionism shows up, right? So it's like comes from
Mm,
this thought of, and a lot of times I think whether it's like you're consciously taking it in or subconsciously taking it in, diet culture is like it permeates throughout our culture. So like we inevitably pick up on some of these things. So that's something that, I see so often with the way that we're taught to think about food, just, even like even if you've never been on a, quote standard diet or whatever, um like it still can kind of come in and impact you. So thinking about like even just subtly the messages of like candy is bad, which, the way that I try to encourage my clients to start to think differently is not thinking that like it's not saying that candy is healthy for you, but it's rather saying you are not a you haven't done anything wrong or bad or committed a crime by eating the candy. Like I like there's a quote actually in the intuitive eating book that says the only reason you should feel guilty about eating something is if you stole it. And I just think that that's so good to just
hmm.
remember. Because what happens is like when it's almost like there's this message that if we are like overeating something or we feel out of control with eating something, we almost need to like think of it as this bad food and like distance ourselves from it and not allow ourselves to have it, right? But what that actually does is it makes us want that food even more. This is like basic like human psychology. When we tell ourselves we can't have it, we
Right.
want it even more. And even more so with food, just because of like the primal like nature of, our relationship to food and food like being what keeps us alive and healthy. So, it just makes that drive to eat that food even worse, even stronger. And then when you do take that first bite, then you get that kind of like what we talked about just a second ago, that dissociation with it of like, all right, well, I've already done something wrong. So now I'm just going to like dissociate from my body for a little bit. And that's where you miss out on being able to be mindful while you're eating it, where, you actually pay attention to when am I full or when am I satisfied by whatever I'm eating, and then being able to notice that and being able to stop. So there's a lot of different components that go into that, but that's something that I see so often is that that all or nothing thinking, really keeping people from being able to just have a healthy balance and like healthy relationship with food where they're able to just eat, and there we go.
Yeah, I resonate with all of that, and sort of there's so many times where I can just remember, thinking of like, oh man, it's been a lot of pizza lately, like no pizza for months or whatever, and it's like that doesn't actually work, or but it was like guilt of having pizza, which in the moment I don't think I was ever, well, only afterwards was I like, oh fuck, I made a mistake, or like it feels like, oh, I lost myself there. And I guess in a sense I did, because maybe sometimes during the eating of it, I wasn't present with it. But sort of the decision to have pizza or order the pizza wasn't like, I wasn't blacked out for that part, but it kind of
Yeah.
feels like they get lumped in some way. And I
Hmm.
just, but I do know there is just sort of, I think, a base level shame around eating. And also I think sometimes I eat so fast, I think a lot of times, that I don't necessarily get a chance to feel full until I'm done. Like I'm just done now and then the full, and that's like, I mean, that's I mean, I say that obvious in that like I know to eat slower, to do all those things. I don't do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Um,
I think something that might be helpful for you is, so something that I work on so often with my clients, and I think it's like, it's probably my favorite thing to talk about because I
Hmm.
see such a huge transformation for people once they start to apply this, is really focusing on satisfaction, which, a lot of times we're so focused on just like, all right, when am I full? When am I full? But I think satisfaction can be such a better indicator if you're starting to pay attention to it. And if you're like, I think when you think about satisfaction, the way that I describe it is that feeling of you can push away from the table and you're not still like thinking about eating or thinking about that food. You feel like completely at peace with it. And there's a couple components that go into satisfaction. There's the actual like your body, you're full, like you're physically full, but there's also that like taste factor of, okay, I've like met my satisfy like met that satisfaction factor just from eating something that I enjoyed and actually enjoying it and paying attention to every bite or like being mindful while I'm eating it. And I think, focusing on that will really help you if you can kind of stay present and stay mindful while you're eating. Something that, I know you said was that you find yourself sometimes eating like those first couple bites and like noticing those, but then not really paying attention to the rest. And I think, if you can kind of tap into focusing on satisfaction and noticing, okay, when am I satisfied? And let that be the indicator for you that, it's maybe a good time to stop eating around that period of time, not as like a rule, but just as a general like guideline.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What are your thoughts?
That makes a lot of sense. And I think, I mean, I totally, it's more like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then be like, oh man, let's see if I can do, but cause I feel like I've had many moments where, I don't know, there's always that bite where it's all, and that one's not the first bite. It's like toward the end, or it's something where it's just like, oh, that was the best bite. And I wonder if that's me being like, you're satisfied now. But then,
Mm,
and I think oftentimes, like a lot of times maybe I have stopped there, but if it's not the end of the whatever I'm eating, I think I would just like I would note that bite as like maybe that was the end of what that satisfaction thing. It seems like that's what my body's telling me now in hindsight, but I would just continue because again, it's like, well, there's only like a little bit more pasta left. Like this isn't gonna keep, and I think I do have shame about like just wasting stuff,
yeah.
especially just like
Yeah.
like just the act of having things and what I have and knowing that people don't, and then just being like, oh, I'm just not gonna finish the food I ordered. What a piece of shit, like that. Um, that part, and I use that then as like ammo for like needing to finish even and be over full because like I'd rather be over full than waste food. So that's another thing, but like what you're saying, I totally understand. I think it is mostly the distracted eating part that is the problem, the
Yeah.
fact that like because then I'm not actually noticing. I try
Mm,
to every morning I like have granola, yogurt, and fruit, and it's the what I'm eating isn't necessarily the problem, but I definitely, I try to start my day with the journal and check in with myself. But after like, I kind of do it for like a minute and then I'm just eating it on my phone. And that's kind of my, eating it on the phone or eating, watching things. And it feels like an addiction of like, I know this isn't, I don't want to be doing this, but I'm also like, I want to be doing this.
yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts on like just eating zero distractions all the time? Like, does that sound fun? Does that sound possible?
I mean, it sounds nice, honestly, and it sounds like kind of like the person I want to be, and the person who
Mhm,
wants to be intentional about all the things. So like, yeah, I want to
mhm.
eat this apple and not be, yeah, whatever else I'm doing. And I think possible. I think it's possible. I just know. I guess in terms of social out like things with eating people, it's really hard for me to do that. Like I don't know how like I think sometimes I mean, I guess this is intuitive in some way, but I try to like if I get my plate, I try to find a place where I can eat and just go and do it, but I think I'm still like eating it much faster and just like sort of finish it so I've done the eating thing, so now I can return to the party sort of a thing. But I don't it's I mean, it is hard for me like at a restaurant or a party or something if I'm eating to be fully ensconced in that food. Like I don't
Yeah.
But I also know that's why a lot of times I have done the thing like, oh, I'm going to leave here, eat it there, and then come back, just so I could be a little bit more present with the food, even though I think I still was like rushing to like get back because it felt like I'm, doing something. There was some sort of shame around that, or like it even sounds shameful, like I'm hiding myself while I'm
Yeah.
eating.
And I kind of asked that question a little bit like to say that you don't have to, it doesn't have to be like zero distractions all the time. Cause like, I mean, to be honest, I love like sitting down and watching a show or watching a movie and eating. It's so fun to me. And it doesn't have to be this thing where it's like, I have to find this quiet place with zero distractions because that's just not always
Right. A
possible.
hyperbaric chamber for your eating. Yeah.
I wonder if instead of like having this goal of I have to have zero distractions in order to eat mindfully, maybe what you can start to practice is just having a couple little check-ins as you're going through your plate. Like I like to, as you're eating, like notice those first couple bites, and then maybe it's like a halfway point, and then maybe it's a little bit after that, right? It doesn't have to be this whole like I have to notice every single bite because that can just feel really overwhelming. I don't know, at least for me. And for most people I've found is like focusing on every single bite can just feel kind of daunting. So maybe it's more of just find a couple check-ins as you're eating. And I also wanted to just say that this is a little bit like a muscle that you work and you practice, and it's not something we have to be perfect at either, or that we just like snap, get it right away, or that we're like once we learn it, we are never an unmindful eater ever again. So it's something that you always come back to and you keep practicing throughout your life too. So just to think about it and have that reminder too.
Well, and I mean, even in my response, I'm doing the all or nothing thing, right? I'm just like, well,
Yeah.
I have to do, I have to do, I have to be mindful every single bite, and that even feels like a punishment on itself, like
Mhm.
sort of
Yeah.
like in this vacuum of like each bite, and like even like I could see myself like taking notes after each bite, just to like, that's the only way I'll like do it. But then I'm not going to want to eat, like, cause I'm gonna be like, oh God,
Yeah.
I've turned it into work, which is, I'm really good
Mm.
at that. That's my superpower. So yeah, I mean, I like, yeah, the check-in. Um, I'm actually thinking of, as a kid, I had, the segmented plates where they were sort of all separated. And I mean, and that was when I was a kid, I was like picky and didn't want anything to mix. Now I'm like the opposite, everything, whatever. But
Mhm.
I'm sort of, I like the idea of the segmented as like, those are different parts to check in though. Like it just sort of in my mind, that's like, I don't know. I just had that ping of memory of those plates. So I was like, I don't know. Not that maybe I need segmented plates that would help me or something. It kind of seems fun. But yeah, like I think especially, yeah, I don't know, the way I watch things, because I was thinking about that when you're saying like how it is enjoyable to eat and like and have I mean, there's whole industries dependent on that, of course. Um, but yeah, I think even just the way that I do it, I sort of feel like, well, I don't want to be split, in some way. So like I kind of am dissociating eating while watching, even though I want to
Mhm.
have something to eat, and then but I also don't want to miss, whatever's happening in the movie. So if I'm, but that seems like a balance to work on as well. And also probably why
Mhm.
captioning is helpful too. You don't need as,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but as a film like snob person, I also sort of feel like, no, I need to be paying attention to the movie. Don't, don't focus too much on your grapes, which I felt like yesterday was a win. I had a late dinner and like I was just full. Lily wanted grapes and she offered them. I was like, I'll have a couple, but but normally I feel like I would have felt like I needed to have half, even though it wasn't even my idea, or it was just sort of like, oh, the grapes are out. Okay, let's just go.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I was trying to be like, what would Victoria do?
Yeah, well, I think like going back to the
Uh,
satisfaction, paying attention in those times of like paying attention to the actual taste as you're eating it. And something that I find helps people so often too is thinking about, so when, we already talked about satisfaction. When we think about satisfaction, can I do a little sticky note like picture? Can I show a picture?
oh my God, I would love a sticky note picture.
Okay. So when we think of satisfaction, um, I think a lot of times in our brains, what we think about is that it's just like this upward trajectory, like always, like this line that just
Mm.
extends forever. Like as we keep eating, it's just going to keep getting better and better tasting. But what actually happens is satisfaction is more like a bell curve where, as we start eating, that satisfaction actually goes up. But then, and I'm not a
Yeah.
great drawer, but satisfaction goes
Oh no.
up until a point, and that's where you're full, and that point of, like we were just saying, like that point where you're like, oh wow, like that hit the spot, that just tasted so good, and I'm full, and I can like push it away from the table and like go and do some other thing. And then, our brain, I think it's helpful to think about, like, your brain's going to say, oh, that was good, more is always going to be better. But what actually happens is those next couple bites, you start to get more full, and that satisfaction actually goes down. So if you can kind of find that point at the top too, that's why I'm such a big fan of actually just noticing how that food tastes. Because what you'll notice is those first couple bites are going to taste really, really good. And like up until that point where you're really full. And then it's going to kind of start to go down. And if you can kind of notice that point at the top where,
Mm.
maybe that taste actually starts to go down, then you're going to notice like, oh, that's like, this is like a good place to stop. So like, even when
Yeah.
I think it's such a helpful tool, because like, even when you're distracted and maybe you're less inclined to think about like that fullness feeling, I think we're more naturally inclined to just like pay attention to how the food is tasting. So if we can kind of notice how that food's tasting, then you're gonna, like, even when you're watching TV, even when you're scrolling on your phone, you can kind of have that little like check in with, every couple bites or so, and notice that point where it's like, oh, this is like not tasting quite as good anymore, and that's probably where I'm full and satisfied.
Yeah, I was gonna it's amazing how simple those graphs were, but also like how like I totally understand what you mean. And I think that's kind of the like those pings of satisfaction are breaking out of the noise. So those are happening even if I'm overstimulated or somewhere else. I'm like, ooh, like I remember I've said them out loud with people watching me as I'm like, that was a really good bite. But then I'm just like
Yeah.
um and I was gonna and you sort of like answer the question of like what is satisfaction and what does that feel like? And because I mean, I feel like that seems like an obvious thing, and it is sort of just like it kind of is that ooh, or this tastes good,
Yeah.
but
Or that hit
I
the
don't know,
spot.
right? But is there like, and I think I think again I would sense that all the time. But are there other sort of sensations or other ways to identify that in the body? I suppose I don't know. I mean, that seems like a stupid question because like we all know when we're satisfied, but at the same time, if that was totally true, why am I doing the bottom of the bell curve almost every time?
Well, I think that we just get out of practice. Like, something that I see with my clients all the time is we're so used to using like external indicators to tell us when we're done eating, like
Yeah.
that clean plate kind of mentality that so many people have, that you shared, that you experience too, that, we have to finish everything on our plate, or like I have to eat at XYZ times during the day, or whatever those like external rules are, or this is like the quote appropriate portion size. um we're so dissociated from actually connecting to our body, so it's like a muscle that we just, like, when you stop using it, you kind of like lose it, it gets weaker, it doesn't work as well. So it's really about building up that connection with your body and paying attention. And as I find that at first it might feel like really you have to like really put a lot of effort and like think about it as you're eating. But once you build up that skill, it's kind of like muscle memory, and you just start to eat, and you're able to, again, like, be out and not have the most perfect distraction free environment, but still have that ability to notice when you're full, when you're satisfied, and then being able to stop at that point.
I mean, it's just like everything, practice. I
Mhm.
know for me, it's like I understand it. I'm like, yes, these will all help. And then I'm also kind of like, well, it's just like with all other sort of types of therapy and mental health things. There's just things that it's like it really requires me to be mindful and in the moment to do those things. And then and I'm mindful with you right now. I feel like if I ate, a bowl of porridge right now, I'd be able to nail it, and I wouldn't even need it because I'm full, I'm satisfied. But the second, you know, we sign off, and then I'm like looking at all the shit that I need to do and have to do all these different things, it's going to be, I just know it's going to be very hard. And I know, again, I'm not expecting perfection, although that would be nice. No, no, but I just know that, like, what are ways to help? I mean, because it does feel like it's a mindfulness practice, right? Like that's sort of what
Mhm.
this is. And how have you honed that, or how do you practice that? Like, sort of, I guess adding an association when it comes to eating helps to do that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just talking it out and being like, this would be
Yeah.
hard for me.
Yeah. Well, I think the best approach would be just to take a little baby step, at a time. So, maybe for you, it's just practicing and, starting off with just like noticing that all or nothing thinking that we started talking about, and noticing when you're kind of going to that place, like, whenever you're like reaching for candy, kind of noticing, okay, this might be my tendency here. And so I'm going to like be mindful of that and, decide to allow some like grace here. Maybe it's to just start to practice that, noticing that satisfaction factor and having that bell curve kind of image in your mind as you're eating and being able to start to practice that. I think also just the best mentality to go into this, across the board is just from this mentality of being curious and like getting to know your body's cues, like getting to know, okay, what does hunger feel like? What does, fullness feel like? What does satisfaction feel like? Asking yourself, okay, what sounds good today? And like almost like you're getting to know your body and getting curious about getting to know it. Because again, a lot of people I find have that dissociation with like their physical body, especially in this area of food. So kind of coming into it almost like this with this like childlike curiosity of wanting to just get to know yourself, I think can be so helpful because that just takes away the pressure. It takes away the shame and the judgment when you don't get it right, right? Like going into it knowing that, okay, I am going to fail. I'm going to make mistakes that I can choose to learn from and, just being curious all throughout.
And I think, I mean, that there is this level of, it's about trust. And I feel like like trusting myself too, and that I can, well, that I can do it, but also trusting my body that it knows what it wants. And I feel like it really is that, while I love food, and I would say it's, I don't know. I mean, it's the blanket level food and like listening in important things. I mean, it's high up there, obviously, and it also is a primal need, like you said. But I think there is, it's sad that I think about like, in terms of my brain power, or what I have the time to sort of put to during a day. I definitely, the food and things that I do, like, they need to be regular or easy, even though like I can cook, I could, whatever. It's not like a can't thing, but it does feel like a can't in terms of time. That's what it feels like,
Mm.
or that I just don't have the brain power to have that conversation with myself, to be like, oh, you know what? Actually, shit, I want asparagus right now. And then that would require me going to the store, getting asparagus and doing all that stuff, which I know that would actually probably feel very, very satisfying if I was able to identify that very specific desire and make it happen.
Sure.
Um, but I'm also just like, fuck, when am I gonna, am I gonna go and get asparagus right now? I mean, that's the weirdest one to say, because I don't think I have ever really desired asparagus in that way. Not that I'm against asparagus, but it's just, it's easier. I think there's certain things where it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go get a beer, I'm gonna go get wine, I'm gonna go get dessert, pizza, whatever.
Hmm.
But I'm just thinking, I think that is how I am also disassociating, or giving less of myself into the food that I'm eating. Unless I'm going out, then I'm like more like, okay, what do I want to eat? And I'm sort of more in it, I think, in that scenario, until maybe, yeah, midway through, then I'm just like going. But
Mm.
that, it does feel like there's part of it is getting, well, I mean, giving more space and time to just food, cooking in general, which, like, I think as someone who's trying to do a million different things at once, it just feels like, well, that's the thing. I'm just going to get the ready-made meals and have the same meals every day until I, rotate them out until, and I think that's part of it. It's like, I don't necessarily need to taste the lentil wrap that I've had 100 different times. I just know I like it. But that makes me really sad when I think about it. Cause I'm like, yeah, that's definitely part of the equation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a balance, right? Like, I think first of all, I, if for us to be intuitive eaters, it doesn't mean we have to just like on the whim say, "Oh, I want asparagus," and like run to the
I know.
store. That's like very impractical. But rather, I think there is an element of like we do have to plan, and like I always use the phrase like you have to plan to be hungry. Like plan on hunger. We're going to be hungry and numerous times throughout the day. We want to plan for that. And so, maybe that looks like having one or two times during the week where you sit down and you say, okay, what might sound good this week? What might I enjoy to eat this week? And, make a little bit of a meal plan of like, I always do is, 3 meals a week that I'm going to be making because I'm going to plan on leftovers because I also am busy and have a lot of things and I don't want to be cooking every single night. So plan on leftovers. So I pick 3 meals that I think that are going to sound good for the week. And then, breakfast items, lunch items, whatever, same snacks, right? Create your grocery list, go to the grocery store once or twice a week, whatever, works well for your schedule. And then you have food on hand that you've already put the forethought into, okay, this is probably something that's going to sound good this week, and you already have things on hand so that you can kind of take away that like running to the grocery store every single day or for every single meal, because I don't know anyone who could do that. But yeah, so that can kind of
Right.
like make it easier as far as that goes. And then something else that I always do and I always recommend is to have those like I call them lazy meals. I probably should not use that word, but you kind of understand. But it's like meals that you get to the end of the day and you're like, I just don't want to cook. I just don't have the brain power. I don't have the energy. I don't want to cook. So these are for me like Costco frozen meals that, we can feel zero. We don't have to feel any shame for those. They serve a purpose for sure for being able to just like provide a meal on the table. And thankfully, I feel like there's a lot of healthier options that are out there that, are pre-made and prepackaged or easy to throw together. So I always plan on having that, or like I also love to go out and eat, out and try new restaurants and all of that. So having room in my schedule, room in our plan for those, times to order takeout or go to a restaurant. So I feel like, having some kind of plan ahead of time can be helpful just to take away the guesswork every single day. And again, that's also going to help you so you're not getting to a meal or even like getting, mid-meal and you're just starving for a snack. You're going to prevent that getting to the meal and being ravenous and then eating really unmindfully because you're just so starving. So I think that those are a couple
Right.
things that might help also.
That I think it would. Yeah. But I also think even the way you said or sort of said that there was like what I think would be nice to eat this week. And I think that also gives you leeway if like, maybe whatever you thought 6 days ago was going to be really good sounding, but that it's not a big deal if you decide to, go for your quote unquote lazy dinner instead, or go out to eat, whatever. Like there is wiggle room baked into that, just that mindset. And I think yeah, the lazy dinner, there's got to, I call them, I think, yeah, like ready made, whatever it is. But I think if I'm thinking about it, being honest, like I feel like unless I'm going out or someone's place, I think all of my meals to this, like for a while, are lazy meals. I think that's just where my brain power, like I just, and I feel like I always feel shame when I admit that too. Like when someone asks, like, and I have a lot of friends that are very, incredible cooks, and like seem like that's where they put much more time and energy into it. And there's this idea that I can't do it, or that like they're better cooks, or whatever bullshit I want to, put on there. But I always have this sort of like, oh yeah, we just don't have the brain power, like we don't cook. And I always feel that like, I feel shame about that, but I also feel understanding for myself. Like in this moment, I'm like, yeah, I know why I do that. Like it's not because yeah, but there is this like, but even that, I think it would help to have a little bit of planning, because I think just having the same meals every day makes it very hard to be mindful during the eating process. because it's just like, yeah, this is the same granola that I've had for a year and a half.
Yeah. And just to know too that like we go through seasons where there's again no shame for that. And also it's your decision and it's just simply like where you value your time, and it's not a problem that you enjoy having more or like have decided to have more pre-made foods. And I for sure have gone through seasons where that has been the case for us too. And it's just like, I would rather be outside and spend time with my kids while they're playing and not be like in the kitchen for an hour. And so I prioritize that. And I don't think that we need to feel shame for that at all. But if it's something that you're like, man, I kind of would like to, like, it sounds like it might be fun to start to cook more. Maybe it is as like, just taking one day where it's like, I'm just going to make one meal and start with that one baby step and just see how it feels. And if you find that you enjoy it, then, maybe experiment with a couple more days if that sounds fun.
I feel like, and I feel like I know that I always enjoy it when I do it too, especially the experimenting, like getting creative with what is around and making it. Cause then there's not even necessarily a goal or like a thing that I'm trying to reach in terms of like this dish, it's just like, oh, let's just like play in the kitchen with the stuff that we have. And it always works out. And I think that's me at my best too. So like I like recognize that. But yeah, it's about, yeah, planning and giving time and space to those, to everything. And I feel like we could probably go forever on this, but I wanted to, yeah, now leap into what brought you into this space and inspired you to, well, and because like my assumption is that you maybe tried a bunch of diets and that they didn't work for you, and then you went your own way. So I would love to know a little bit about, yeah, what brings you to this approach.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say like most women, at least I'll speak for women, but for most women, when I was in my teenage years, I was, told, kind of bought into the message that in order to be healthy, we have to count and track every little calorie and every little thing that we're eating, and, obsess over only eating the quote right foods. And just part of my nature, part of my personality is I am also very all or nothing, which is why I feel like I attract those type of clients as well. So I took it to the extreme also, and like got very obsessed with like health and eating, and it was like, I call myself like I was a professional dieter. I was just like, that was my life. And it was just taking, that was about 8 years that I kind of had this unhealthy relationship with food. I, physically was seeing some symptoms of actually not being healthy because of my relationship with food. And I was very restrictive and kind of took health to this extreme. And I also like mentally was, really struggling because food was something I was always thinking about and stressing about and anxious about. And so I got to this point where I was like, I do not want to be 80 years old and still obsessing over every little calorie that I'm eating. And I thought there's got to be a better way. And thankfully, around that time, listened to a podcast, and they were talking about intuitive eating, which I think is so fun because, now, being on podcasts and having a podcast, I get to, hopefully give other people that kind of experience too. But I learned about intuitive eating, and I think with my background in nursing and understanding of the human body, and also just with like my own inner work I'd done some inner work on my relationship with food up until this point, but learning about intuitive eating on that podcast, something clicked for me and it just made so much sense. And I had this realization that, I, number one, wasn't living a healthy life because like my mental health was struggling. My physical health was starting to struggle because of how obsessive I was with food. And I realized, like, okay, we don't have to obsess over every little calorie or obsessively try to control food for us to be healthy. And so that was the start of me just starting to break up with dieting and start to lean into and like stepping out in faith that I really could trust my body and I could just listen to my body. And then it was really just starting to practice that. And, you know, getting to know like all of the things that we talked about today, like learning to listen to my hunger cues and fullness cues, and letting that be what led me to, you know, knowing how to eat. And that's also when I decided I was like, you know, I know for a fact that I'm not the only one who's struggled with this. You know, I see it so much and, you know, saw so much in my friends and, you know, my family, you know, they were big time dieters. So I knew that this was a place of need and wanted to commit to helping other people have a better relationship with food and their bodies and really improve their health also through this way of intuitive eating. So that's kind of what led me into this work. And I've been at this point now, been a coach here in this space for the last 6 years. So it's been amazing and I love it. And being able to see the transformation in people, you know, even like what you said, so much of this, so much of like at the root of it all really comes from this belief that we can't trust ourselves with food and helping people get to this place where they really are able to trust themselves and be able to just, you know, listen to their bodies. It is so rewarding and so fun for me. And I just love seeing that transformation for the people that I work with. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. So yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you for letting me be a part of that journey and for sharing that journey with us. And like what strikes me, and I feel like this is, I guess, a through line with all, you know, sort of, I mean, passionate people in general, but it sort of feels like the thing that like helps or saves you is then becomes what your superpower is or your specialty that then you can impart and help with other people. And that sort of even just helping yourself then ended up being the thing that you can help other people with, you know, and it wasn't necessarily, it's not where you started. You're like, I'm not going to help myself so I can coach people. It just sort of happens. And I just think that's really, I mean, beautiful. And so, Victoria, just thank you for being in this space and for being, yeah, non-judgmental and welcoming of, I think, just messy slash, you know, basic Andy, I think, in this way. I feel like such a child in some of this conversation, but I also feel like that's kind of what I have to be to make sure I'm understanding.
You're not alone. I mean, this is something I feel like so many people struggle with like it sounds so basic, but like just generally like how do I even eat? And it's because it's so overcomplicated. So yeah, you're not alone for sure.
And I think that seems to be the thing. It's like, well, it's like everything is overcomplicated or overstimulated. There's so many different options and different things that we're being told. There's 8 million different ways to eat in the one right way, where it's just like, wait, the only person that knows that is me, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that's the through line for sort of, I mean, this show that and not, that wasn't necessarily what I knew I was doing when I started it either, of like, oh, okay, yeah, it's about what feels good to me. And figuring out how to remember that and remember how to unlock that. So I feel like you gave me another piece of that today. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing. And I wanted to give the floor to you to let people know how to find you, how to seek out your coaching.
Sure. Yeah. So you can connect with me at my website, which is victoria-yates.com. And I also have a free mini course on there. You can go to victoria-yates.com/mini course that it's called the Done with Dieting for Good mini course. If you're wanting some help on just getting started and you're like, okay, I'm done with dieting, done with all the counting and tracking and all of that. And I want to know, well, how do I actually eat without that? This course is going to walk you through that. So you can find that at my website. You can also find me on Instagram at nondiet_RN. And then, as you mentioned at the beginning, I have the Redefining Health podcast where we put out an episode every week.
Woo! And also, you, like all smart coaches, offer a free consultation as well, I believe. So
Yeah.
if there's a free consultation, take the free consultation. You'll learn something. I think everyone's afraid to be like that they'll have to say yes or whatever. But in my experience, no one is doing that. They want to help, and then you know more, and that's the gift, is knowing more. So highly recommend reaching out to Victoria, or free consultations everywhere. Not to take advantage, but to educate yourself. Because I think that's like, if you have that desire or intuition to be like, "Ooh, this is something that I would like help on," I think listen to it. And I mean, I'm really glad you did. And so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And I love what you said at the end there, that like you're the best expert. That's something I always say to my clients, and I'm such a believer in, is that like I'm not the expert of your body. I'm like the guide to help you discover that expertise, but ultimately you're the best expert of your body because you're the only one in your body. And I think that we don't get that message enough in the health and wellness space. So, yeah, thank you for having me here.
Thanks for listening to the Naked Man podcast. I'm about to follow Victoria's advice and make a meal plan for the rest of the week. We'll drop a blank meal plan in the show notes so you can download it and do the same. If you want to stay naked, make sure to follow and subscribe to the Naked Man podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Let's stop eating while on our phones together. This episode was edited and produced by Freddie Beckley and hosted by me, Andy Greene. Next time on the Naked Man podcast, I sit down with founding executive director of Intact America, Georgianne Chapin, and circumcision survivor Willie Kay, to talk about circumcision and the reasons why America's the only Western developed country that still practices it. In the meantime, as my dad always says, be sweet. Ugh. Do you want me to do it one more time? I feel like that was my worst one. Okay. Jesus.